I wonder if you can guess who this guy here is, or what he is, what his job is. Well, I'm going to give you a clue. Okay, so this is what he is. He is and this is the clever bit where we take a black paintbrush and we get white letters. So General. Spells general. So we're going to look at the story of a general today. Now normally when we think of a general we think of how brave they are, or how sort of clever they are, how influential they are. Well, today we're going to look at something different. We're actually going to look at this. We're going to look at a general's mistakes. A general's mistakes. By the way, if you're intrigued on how you do these lettering, like this, it's called ladder lettering, and there's actually a video on my YouTube channel which will teach you how to do it. So we're going to look at a general's mistakes, and here's a general, and say he was extremely brave, and he had an amazing life. He was the most important person in the army, and he was the king's favourite person in the army, and he had a brilliant wife. He had a lovely family, he had a lovely house, and he had won lots and lots of medals. In fact, he won so many medals that every day, when he got up in the morning, he would have to do lots and lots of exercises with a chest expander just to make sure that he got enough space on his chest to get all the medals. Well, the story starts one Saturday evening, and Saturday evening, like for many people, is bath night. And there was the general in his bath. He was playing with his battleship and his submarine and his rubber duck, when suddenly he noticed on his arm there was a bit of a mark. So he dunked it in the water and it was still there. So he got a flannel and some soap and he gave it a good rub, and it just didn't come off. And he looked at it closer and he thought, oh no, I know what that is. It's leprosy, which is a horrible, horrible disease. And as a disease, it's kind of really contagious, and it meant that, well, he wouldn't be able to stay in the army as a famous general. He'd have to leave that. He wouldn't be able to go and see the king in the royal palace. He'd be barred from that. He'd have to leave his home, have to leave his family. In fact, it's worse than the coronavirus. And it meant that he would have to go and live somewhere in a long way away in a special place where the only people that would be there would be other lepers. Well, you don't have to worry about that, because actually leprosy is not something that we have in this country. And even if somebody did get it, then we can cure it today with the right drugs. But in the general's time, it was the most disastrous illness that you could possibly get. Well, in the general's house, they had a little servant girl that came from the land of Israel. And when she heard that the general had got leprosy, she had a word with her mistress, the general's wife, and she told him that in her country, in Israel, there was a very famous man of God that she felt sure that if the general went to see him, that the man of God would be able to heal him from his leprosy. And so his wife told him all that had been said by the servant girl, and Naaman, that's his name, Naaman went to see the king, and he said, look, your royal highness, I've got this leprosy, but I've heard that in Israel there's a special man of God that should be able to heal me. And the king said, whoa, you better get out of the palace, because we don't want anybody else to get it, but you are my favourite general. And so not only will I send you to the king of Israel, but I'll give you a letter to the king of Israel, and telling him that you are my favourite general, and would he send you to this man of God so that you might be healed from leprosy. And so the general, he got the letter from the king, and he went back home. And as he was going back home is when he began to make the first of all a number of different mistakes, because he thought, well, if I'm going to go to see this man of God, then I'd better take him a gift. And so he went and he went down to the bank he got out some money, he went down to the shops and he bought lots and lots of really nice, beautiful designer clothing. And so he had loads of money because, you see, he thought that he'd have to do this. He'd have to, whoops. He'd have to pay the man of God to get rid of this leprosy. Now, you know, actually, I said that leprosy is not really a problem for us today, but we do have a disease that's worse than that, worse than coronavirus. It's a disease that I call the eye disease. Not this kind of an eye disease, but this kind of an eye disease. That great big capital eye that kind of runs through our lives very often, and it's kind of like selfishness and self-centeredness and lots of stuff like that. It's kind of formed of all the wrong things that we do, say and think. And what it does, it acts like a barrier that stops us from knowing God. It's kind of a great big barrier that gets in the way. And often we think that we have to pay to get rid of that eye disease. And we think, well, I can't do it myself. There's no way I can sort of get rid of it. But maybe if I'm really good, and if I'm good for a whole week, then maybe that'll get rid of that eye disease. And so we go around helping old ladies across the road, even if they don't want to be helped across the road, and a whole bunch of other things. But you know, that isn't the way to get rid of it. We can't pay to get rid of it. But somebody has paid the price, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Anyway, the general got all his stuff. He got on his chariot, he took a whole bunch of soldiers with him, and he journeyed across to Israel. Then when he got to Israel, he thought, well, I wonder where this mighty man of God lives. He's bound to live in a palace. I know, I'll go to the king, and we'll go into the king's palace and ask him if he will send me to the man of God. And so he went in to the palace, and he went in and he saw this man here. He went into the king and he gave the king the letter from his king. And the king opened it up and he began to read the letter and said, "Oh, your most excellent, this is my favourite general, and he's got leprosy in it." "What? You've got leprosy? Get out of here, get him out of here. We can't have leprosy in the palace, we can't have anybody else getting this." And you see, this is the second mistake that the general Naaman made. You see, he went to the wrong person. And we do that as well when we try to get rid of that eye disease. We very often go to the wrong person. I mean, it's good to go to people and get their advice, isn't it? I mean, if you had a problem in school, then it's good to go to see your teacher or the head teacher, because they can help deal with that. And other problems and things, it's good to go to our parents. But you know, our parents and our teachers can't get rid of that eye disease. There is a person that can get rid of that, but I'll tell you about him a little bit later on. Well, Naaman left the king's palace and he was like, I don't know where to go. What am I going to do now? I've travelled all this way. Where is this mighty man of God? Well, the mighty man of God, somebody called Elisha, God had already told him that Naaman was coming. And so he sent his servant, and his servant found him there at the palace. And he said, "My master, Elisha, the mighty man of God that you're looking for, has heard about your quest for healing. And so if you go to see him, this is his address." And so Naaman got back in his chariot with his army, and they went off, and eventually they came to the house of Elisha. And Naaman went up and kind of stood outside, and he thought, well, if Elisha knows that I'm coming, soon he'll come out and he'll come and take me in and give me his greeting and his blessing and all the rest of it. Well, after a little while, it wasn't Elisha that came to the door, but one of his servants. And he said, Naaman, you've come. I've got a message from you from my master Elisha. Well, hang on a minute, said Naaman. Don't you know who I am? I'm a really important general. I'm really famous. I'm the very best general in the whole of the country that I come from. Surely your master wants to see me personally. But the servant said, no, it's okay. Elisha sent me and given me this message to come to say that if you want to be healed, that God will heal you. But you have to go to the river Jordan. And there, when you get there, dip yourselves in and bathe yourself 7 times and then you will be healed. Naaman was furious. He was furious because, you see, he didn't like the plan. He wanted to meet Elisha himself. He didn't want to do this, and so he was just really cross. He jumped back in his chariot. He sort of cracked his whip, and with a wheelie, he took off into the distance. You know, very often we can be like that as well. You see, there is a plan to get rid of that eye disease. God has got a plan that we can get rid of it. But often we don't like what that plan is. And so we try and do it ourselves. We go our own way. Well, the rest of the soldiers, they thought they'd better go and catch up with Naaman. And so they followed in after him. And eventually they found him there at the River Jordan. And there he was, sat on a rock at the side of the River Jordan. One of the other soldiers went out to him and said, "Sir, Your Excellency, did it work? Have you been healed?" "What? Are you kidding me?" said the general. Have you seen the state of that river? Look at it. It's all mucky and scummy. We've got much nicer rivers back in our country where we come from. I don't want to get in that. I might catch something. And this is his next mistake. You see, he didn't like the place. He thought any other place would be better than this. He didn't want to come in this place. But you know what? His soldier must have been quite brave. He said, "Well, sir, Naaman, we've come all this way to try to be healed by the mighty man of God. And the mighty man of God said that God will heal you. And he's kind of giving you this plan and sent you to this place. Why don't you at least try it?" And so Naaman reluctantly went down. He went into the river and he sort of got it there up to his waist, and he kind of held his nose and he dipped himself down. And when he got up and he looked at it, he said, "Oh, this is rubbish. It hasn't worked at all. I've still got this leprosy." But how many times did Elisha say that Naaman had to dip down into the river? Yeah, not one. It was 7 times once, wasn't it? And so his soldier said, "Look, sir, you were told to dip 7 times. Surely it's worth trying. 7 times you might be healed." And so Naaman dipped down. He dipped down once, so he went 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's when it happened. When he got up at the 7th time, the leprosy, that mark on his skin, had disappeared and he had been healed. And of course he was really excited, jumped around for joy, and before he going back to his own country. As I said, there is a place where we can be healed of that eye disease. I've been talking about it all the way through. The way that we do it, because there was a person that paid the price, and that person was Jesus. When Jesus died on the cross, he paid the price. It was all part of God's plan, that because Jesus was punished in our place, because he was perfect, but yet we're not. So he paid the price for the wrong things that we've done and said and thought. And the place that he did that was at that cross. And so that if anybody wants to, they can come to God in their prayers and say that they're sorry and ask Him to forgive them. And God promises that He will forgive us. I did that when I was 23 years old. And I went and said, God, I'm really, really sorry for the wrong things I've done, said and thought. Will you forgive me? Will you clean me up on the inside? And Lord, if you will, I'll follow you, and I'll kind of become your servant, if you like. And that's why I go around schools and other places telling people all about Jesus. Because you see, Jesus didn't stay dead. 3 days later he came back to life, and then 6 weeks after that he went back to be with God in heaven, which is why we can come to Him in our prayers if we want to. Do you know what? After all these years as a Christian, I think it was the best decision that I ever made. If you've enjoyed the story, please do hit the like button and subscribe too, so you can stay in touch. Thank you.